What if the taxi you're sitting in isn't taking you home, but straight into the hands of the dead? One man thought it was just a normal ride on a late night, but when he glanced at his phone, he realized the taxi wasn't on any road, it was circling inside a cemetery. And when he looked into the mirror, the driver had no face. This isn't just a story about a haunted cab, it's about what happens when the living and the dead ride together. And the most terrifying part, the passenger was never seen again. It was close to midnight when Daniel stepped out of the bar. The street was quieter than usual, the neon signs flickering in tired spasms above shuttered storefronts. A cold mist hung low, curling along the sidewalks and swallowing the glow of the lamps. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets, breath fogging in the air, and glanced around for a cab. His phone battery was almost dead, 6%, and he didn't want to risk calling a rideshare. That part of the city was notorious for weak signals and worse drivers. Just as he was about to start walking toward the busier avenue, a yellow cab rolled slowly around the corner, headlights dim, almost as if it had been waiting for him. Daniel raised his arm, and the cab pulled over with a soft squeal of brakes. He slid into the back seat. The driver didn't say a word. No greeting, no where to. Just the faint smell of something stale in the air, like damp earth mixed with gasoline. The partition glass was fogged, and the interior light didn't come on when Daniel shut the door. 19th and Collins, Daniel said, leaning forward slightly. It's near the river. The driver gave a short nod without looking back. His hands pale, long finger tightened on the wheel. The taxi lurched forward. Daniel settled back, rubbing his temples. The bar's last whiskey still burned faintly in his throat. The cab moved through the narrow streets, tires hissing against damp pavement. For a while, Daniel kept his eyes closed, trying to shake off the drowsiness creeping in. But when he opened them again, something felt off. The cab was passing a row of graffiti-marked brick walls, broken lampposts leaning at odd angles. He knew these streets. He'd seen that collapsed dumpster earlier tonight, walking to the bar. Yet here it was again. Hey, Daniel leaned forward, tapping the partition glass. You're going the wrong way. You need Collins. The driver didn't respond. The man's neck was thin, skin pale under the dim glow of the dashboard. His head was tilted forward slightly, like he was staring too intently at the road. Did you hear me? Daniel asked louder this time. The driver nodded once, but the car didn't change direction. A prickling unease slid through Daniel's chest. He turned to the window. They passed the same row of shuttered bodegas. The same liquor store with the broken sign. Even the same vagrant curled up under a blanket on the stoop. The car was circling. Daniel pulled out his phone, thumb shaking slightly as he opened his Maps app. His location dot spun for a moment, then settled. He frowned. The cab wasn't anywhere near Collins. It wasn't even near the bar anymore. His screen showed a small gray area marked Evergreen Cemetery. The car was looping around its outer streets. Over and over, Daniel's chest tightened. He leaned forward again. All right, enough of this. Pull over. I said pull the hell over. The driver's hands twitched on the wheel. Still no answer. The engine's growl deepened as the cab rolled past another gated arch. Daniel's phone buzzed weakly in his hand. For a second, he thought it was a text, but when he looked down, the screen had gone black. Battery dead. Damn it, he muttered, slamming the useless device against his knee. He looked up at the rearview mirror. The driver's eyes should have been there, reflected back at him in the small rectangle of glass. But the mirror only showed Daniel's own pale face, wide-eyed and rigid in the back seat. The driver's seat was just a dark silhouette. Daniel's breath caught. He blinked once, twice. The mirror stayed the same. His own reflection. No one else's. Stop the car, Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. The driver didn't slow down. The cab veered around another corner, headlights sweeping across rusted gates, Tall iron fences, marble stones half hidden in mist. Evergreen Cemetery wasn't a place Daniel ever visited, but he'd heard stories about it. Local legends, missing people, strange lights at night. The kind of urban myths you laugh about in daylight, but never want to test in the dark. Now, trapped in the back of a cab circling its boundary, he couldn't laugh at anything. The smell in the car grew stronger, damp, earthy, almost like rot. He gagged, covering his nose with his sleeve. The driver finally spoke. His voice was low, like a whisper dragged across gravel. Almost there. Daniel's heart thudded. Almost where? The driver didn't answer. The cab turned down a narrower road, one Daniel didn't recognize. The pavement cracked under the tires. Trees loomed on either side, branches clawing at the roof. The headlights flashed across a sign, rusted and tilting. Cemetery service entrance. Daniel's hands curled into fists. Stop, right now. I'm not kidding. The driver's head twitched. Slowly, he turned it, just enough for Daniel to glimpse a sliver of his face in the glow of the dashboard. The skin wasn't right. It hung loose, almost gray, lips drawn back too far over teeth that didn't look entirely human. His eyes, if they were eyes, were pale and clouded like glass marbles. Daniel slammed his palm against the door handle. Locked. The car drove deeper into the trees. And as Daniel's panic rose, he realized something even worse. From beyond the fence, past the graves and monuments, he saw movement. Figures, dozens of them, walking slowly between the headstones, all of them turning toward the approaching cab. Daniel's pulse hammered as the cab slowed, crunching over broken asphalt. The trees pressed closer, their skeletal branches scraping the roof. The figures beyond the fence shifted, almost in unison, their heads turned toward the headlights. They weren't just shadows. As the car drew nearer, the fog parted enough for Daniel to see them more clearly. Men and women, their clothes old, torn, faded as if bleached by years underground. Their faces were pale, sunken, some with empty sockets where eyes should have been. Yet they were all moving, shambling, dragging, stepping with stiff precision toward the service gate. Daniel pounded the door again, frantic. Let me out. The driver whispered, You're safer inside. Safer from what? Daniel's voice cracked. The driver didn't answer. His shoulders hunched, hands pale against the wheel, veins bulging darkly beneath the skin. The car stopped at the gate. It swung open with a groan, though no one touched it. The figures were waiting inside the fence now, lining either side of the cracked path like a silent audience. Daniel's throat closed. He'd never believed in ghosts and monsters and anything beyond what you could see in daylight. But daylight felt like another world. Here, the night was absolute. The cab rolled forward, and the figures stepped back in eerie synchronization, creating a corridor toward the heart of the cemetery. Their heads turned as Daniel passed, some jaws twitching like they were trying to speak, but couldn't form words. Stop this. Daniel shouted, slamming his fists on the glass partition. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but I swear to God. The driver's voice cut in, flat and toneless. God doesn't come here. Daniel's skin went cold. The cab reached a wide clearing. Moonlight broke through the fog, just enough to reveal rows of crumbling tombstones, some toppled, others leaning like drunks. At the center stood a stone mausoleum, its iron doors chained, but half-hanging from rusted hinges. The ground in front of it was disturbed, dirt piled in uneven mounds. The driver stopped. His pale hands rested motionless on the wheel. Why are we here? Daniel whispered, pressing himself against the back seat. The driver finally turned. His face was clearer now in the moonlight, and more wrong than before. The skin along his jaw was cracked, split like dry clay. A faint black liquid seeped from his nostrils. His cloudy eyes locked on Daniel, and for the first time, his lips curved into a grin. They've been waiting for you. The back doors clicked. The locks popped open. Daniel froze. The cold air seeped in, carrying the heavy stench of soil and rot. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the figures began to close in. They shuffled forward from the shadows, slow but purposeful. Hands reached, thin and skeletal, some missing fingers, others clawed and broken. Their mouths opened, releasing faint sighs, whispers that hissed together in a rising chorus. Daniel snapped out of paralysis. He kicked the opposite door open, stumbled onto the wet grass, and ran. The cemetery was a maze of tilted headstones and sunken graves. The fog wrapped around his ankles, pulling at his steps. Behind him, the whispers grew louder, thousands of faint voices layered together. He didn't dare look back. His lungs burned as he darted between monuments. He had no plan, no direction, only the desperate thought, get out, get out, get out. But the cemetery was bigger than it looked from the outside. Every path curved back on itself. Every row of stones seemed the same. He turned one corner, then another, only to find himself back at the same mausoleum, the cab idling nearby, headlights dim and unwavering. The driver was standing outside now. Daniel stopped dead. The man's body was wrong, too tall, too thin, his arms hanging too low. His face drooped like melting wax, the grin still carved into his features. The shadows clung to him, writhing against his outline. "You don't belong out there," the driver said, voice echoing unnaturally, as if spoken by many mouths at once. "You belong here." Daniel staggered backward, tripping over a half-buried stone. His ankle twisted, sending a jolt of pain up his leg. He scrambled to his feet, limping. The driver moved without walking, sliding across the ground like he was being pulled. The whispers rose, no longer faint but urgent, frantic. Daniel clutched his chest, trying to steady his breath. His mind screamed for reason. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be real, but the cold earth beneath him and the suffocating stench of decay told him otherwise. He bolted toward the mausoleum, the only shelter in sight. The iron doors groaned as he yanked them open just wide enough to slip inside. He slammed them shut behind him, pressing his back against the cool stone. Silence fell. The whispers outside dulled, muffled by the walls. Daniel's hands shook violently. His phone was useless, his voice hoarse from shouting. He peered into the mausoleum's dark interior. Rows of stone shelves lined the walls, each holding a crumbling coffin or fragments of bone. The air was thick, heavy with mildew. At the center lay an open stone sarcophagus, empty but for scraps of rotted fabric. Daniel's breathing echoed in the hollow chamber. For a brief moment, he thought he was safe. Then, from the far corner, came a sound. A soft scrape, like nails dragging slowly against stone. Daniel's stomach dropped. He squinted into the dark. Something was moving there, something pale, crouched. Its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally sideways. The thing crawled into the faint shaft of moonlight. Its skin was stretched thin over bones, eyes black hollows, mouth gaping wider than humanly possible. And it was smiling. Daniel stumbled back, his heels scraping against stone. The creature emerged fully into the strip of moonlight, moving on all fours like an animal, but jerky, spasmodic, as if every movement cracked its bones a little more. Its grin didn't fade. "Stay away," Daniel whispered, grabbing a chunk of broken stone from the floor. His hand shook so violently he almost dropped it. The thing tilted its head. Its jaw creaked as it opened wider, wider still, until Daniel thought the skin would split. Then, in a voice that wasn't its own, a woman's voice, it spoke. "Daniel." His chest tightened. That was his mother's voice. She'd been dead for 10 years. The thing crawled closer. "Come home," it crooned, tone warped, shuddering like a cassette tape unraveling. "No," Daniel choked out, raising the stone. "You're not her." The creature stopped. For a moment it was silent. Then, with a convulsion, its voice changed again, deeper now, A man's voice. "You left me," it said. Daniel froze. That voice was familiar too. It was Alex, his friend from college. The one who had gone missing after a night of heavy drinking by the river. They'd searched for weeks but never found a body. The creature's grin stretched impossibly wider. "We all left something unfinished. That's why we're here." Daniel's head spun. The mausoleum walls seemed to close in, the shelves of coffins leaning nearer. He pressed himself against the door, fumbling for the handle. Locked. Somehow, from the outside, locked. The whispers had started again. They seeped through the stone walls, thousands of voices murmuring, rising in unison. "Come with us. Stay with us. Join us." The creature lunged. Daniel swung the rock with all the strength he had. It connected with a sickening crunch. The thing recoiled, screeching, its face splitting open, pale ichor spraying across the floor. Daniel didn't wait. He shoved himself toward the sarcophagus, climbed on top of it, and scrambled up the side shelves like a desperate animal. Coffins splintered beneath his weight, bones clattering to the ground. He didn't care. He just needed to get away from that grin. The creature hissed, skittering after him. Its limbs bent backward as it climbed, scraping against the stone like nails on glass. At the top of the shelves, Daniel shoved at a loose stone block near the ceiling. His fingers found purchase. He pushed, muscles screaming. The block gave way, tumbling down and smashing on the floor. Moonlight spilled through the gap. He clawed at the hole, tearing his hands raw until it was wide enough to pull himself through. With a final heave, he dragged his body out and tumbled onto the grass outside. He rolled onto his back, gasping, his chest heaving. The cemetery stretched around him, endless rows of stones in the mist, but the cab was gone. And so was the driver. Daniel staggered to his feet, limping. His ankle burned with every step. He didn't know where to run, but he couldn't stay near that mausoleum. He stumbled through the fog, weaving between gravestones, listening for pursuit. For a moment, only silence followed him. Then faintly, the low growl of an engine. He spun. Through the mist, headlights flared to life. The cab, sitting there, just yards away, facing him. Daniel's stomach dropped. The driver was inside again, pale hands gripping the wheel, head bowed. "No," Daniel whispered. No. The cab rolled forward, tires crunching over graves, moving impossibly smoothly across uneven ground. Daniel turned and ran, ignoring the stabbing pain in his ankle. He dodged between headstones, hoping the cab couldn't follow, but every time he looked back, it was closer. The fog thickened, swallowing everything. Daniel's lungs burned. He tripped, fell hard onto his knees, and looked up. A figure stood before him, not the driver. Not the creature from the mausoleum. A man. He looked normal, ordinary. Dark jacket, tired eyes, stubble on his jaw. His face was pale but human, his features sharp under the moonlight. "Help," Daniel gasped, crawling toward him. "Please, you have to help me." The man crouched, his expression unreadable. "You got in the wrong cab." Daniel froze. The man's voice was low, steady. "They always wait by that bar. People stumbling out drunk, looking for a ride home. Easy targets. You weren't the first. What are you talking about?" Daniel rasped. "Who are you?" The man's gaze darkened. "I was like you, 15 years ago. Got in the wrong cab. Thought I'd escaped. But you don't escape. You just change." The headlights flared brighter. Daniel turned, shielding his eyes. The cab was almost on top of them now, but it didn't hit. It stopped just behind the man. And Daniel realized with a crawling horror that the man had no shadow. The man smiled faintly, a hollow, tired smile. "They want someone new. They'll take you. Then maybe I can finally rest." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the cab. Daniel backed away, shaking his head violently. "No, I'm not getting in that thing. The man's smile vanished. His face twisted, veins bulging, skin paling. You don't have a choice. The back door of the cab swung open with a creak. Darkness yawned inside, thicker than the night, pulsing like it was alive. Daniel's breath hitched. Behind him, the whispers rose again. From the mausoleum, from the graves, from the fog. All chanting the same words, thousands of voices weaving into one. Get in. Daniel stood frozen at the edge of the open cab door. The darkness inside wasn't normal shadow. It swirled alive, almost breathing. A smell seeped out of it, earth, rot, wet stone. The kind of smell that stuck in the back of your throat. The man with no shadow took a step closer. His voice was calm, almost pleading. Don't fight it. The longer you resist, the worse it gets. Daniel shook his head violently. No, I'm not. I'm not dying here. The man's face twisted. You think this is about dying? Death would be mercy. This is about belonging. Behind Daniel, the whispers grew louder. The figures among the graves moved again, closing in from every direction. Their mouths hung open, sighing in rhythm. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing against his chest like a weight. Daniel stumbled backward, nearly tripping into the cab itself. His hands gripped the door frame, knuckles white. He peered into the blackness within. For a moment, he thought he saw something move inside, shapes, faces, hands pressing against the glass from the wrong side. No, he whispered, trying to force his legs to move. No, I won't. He bolted to the side. Limping, half running, he darted between gravestones. The whispers rose into a shriek. The cab engine roared to life, headlights blinding as it swerved after him. Daniel dove behind a cracked marble monument as the cab screeched past, tires digging into wet earth. He scrambled, clawing at the ground, pulling himself toward the far end of the cemetery. He saw the faint outline of wrought iron fence ahead. Salvation. His lungs burned. His ankles screamed with pain, but he pushed on. He reached the fence, grabbing its cold bars, shaking them. Rust flaked off in his hands, locked, too high to climb. Behind him, the cab's engine growled low. It idled only feet away. Daniel turned, chest heaving. The driver was outside the cab again, standing perfectly still, pale hands hanging at his sides. His cloudy eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting white. You don't get out, the driver rasped. No one gets out. Daniel gritted his teeth. His mind screamed at him to give up, to collapse and let the shadows take him. But something deeper kept him moving. Rage, terror, the will to live. He grabbed a loose stone from the ground and hurled it at the cab's windshield. It struck with a crack, spiderwebbing the glass. The engine screamed louder, furious. The driver's head tilted. His mouth stretched open until the skin tore at the corners. From that gaping maw poured the whispers, all of them at once, screaming inside Daniel's skull. Belong. Daniel dropped to his knees, clutching his head. Blood trickled from his nose, his vision blurred. He wanted to scream back, but no sound came. And then through the chaos, another sound broke in. A siren. Faint at first, but growing louder. Police? An ambulance? He didn't know, didn't care. It was real, human, his chance. The cab's headlights flickered, sputtered. The figures in the graveyard froze mid-step, their heads twisting toward the sound. The driver snarled, skin peeling from his face in strips. They can't take you. You're ours. Daniel forced himself to his feet. No, he spat, blood mixing with saliva. I'm not. He threw himself at the fence, climbing despite the pain tearing through his ankle. Rusted spikes tore into his palms. His jacket snagged, ripping down the back. He hauled himself higher until his chest cleared the top. The driver rushed forward, impossibly fast, hands stretching like claws. They scraped against Daniel's leg, burning cold where they touched. Daniel kicked, tearing free, and flung himself over the top. He hit the ground hard on the other side. His body screamed with pain, but he rolled onto his stomach and looked back. The driver was pressed against the bars, face twisted in fury, whispers spilling out like a hurricane. The cab idled behind him, headlights throbbing wildly. The figures in the cemetery had gathered at the fence, hundreds of them, pale hands reaching through the iron gaps, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. The sirens drew closer. Red and blue lights cut through the fog. For the first time, the horrors recoiled. The driver stepped back, melting into the shadows, his form unraveling into mist. The cab flickered, then vanished, headlights collapsing into the night. The cemetery was silent. Daniel lay in the dirt, gasping, shaking, as the squad car pulled up on the road nearby. 2 officers jumped out, flashlights cutting through the mist. "Sir, are you all right?" one called, rushing over. Daniel tried to speak, but only coughed. His throat was raw, his body trembling uncontrollably. They helped him to his feet, shining lights over his torn clothes, his bloodied hands. "What the hell happened to you?" Daniel's mouth opened. He wanted to explain, to tell them about the cab, the driver, the things in the cemetery. But as he turned back to point, the cemetery was just still, empty. The fog hung low, tombstones leaning peacefully in the dark. No figures, no mausoleum, nothing but silence. The officers exchanged a look. One muttered, probably drunk, fell over the fence, but Daniel knew. He knew what he saw. And as they guided him toward the car, he caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror of a squad car. Not his face. The pale, grinning driver staring back at him. The mirror cracked, and the siren wailed into the night.